In my book, I've written a lot of wonderful things about me and Willie in Oklahoma, and it was a happy time for us. But there were some bad things too that happened that you tend to forget or push at the back of your memory. One of the things was that I got burned real bad when I was 6 years old, and Mama lost the twins. It was 4th of July, and all the family and neighbors, everybody was coming. I remember Daddy putting the sawhorses and making big tables out under the tree. And there was a lot of women there helping Mama cook. And I can recall Daddy getting in the wagon with some men going to the field and coming up with a wagon bed half full of watermelon from the watermelon patch. I was really anticipating that meal. But me and the children were playing tag, and we kept running through the house. And Mama kept saying, "Don't run through the house." But in 5 minutes we'd forget, and here we go again. Straight through the front door and out through the kitchen door. It was a good track. So, but on this day, I wasn't being very obedient, so about 5 minutes later, I was running through the house, and she grabbed me with the shoulders and shook me and said, "I said, don't run through the house." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And I went on out the kitchen door and forgot all about it. Run around the house with the girls, and we were running and laughing and playing. 5 minutes, I was going back to the kitchen. And just as I went to the kitchen door, Mama was boiling caramel to ice a cake in a big iron skillet. Just as I went to the door, she turned from the stove with that skillet of boiling caramel, and I ran right into her, hit my front teeth on the skillet, and it went up into my hair and down over my entire front was burned. Both arms and my face, my whole face was burned. But my bangs were long. She kept me in bangs and she hadn't trimmed them in a long time, and I guess that saved my eyes. I passed out. That's when she grabbed the soda, and she was just screaming and crying. It hurt her, I think, worse than it did me. And when I come to later on, I was laying on the front porch on the pallet, and her and Daddy was bending over me, dabbing something on my blisters. I don't remember what. Maybe cold water. It killed the celebration, you know. I don't know if they went ahead and had the dinner. I suppose they might have. But Mom and Daddy were too devastated to enjoy it.
I imagine so.
And for several days, Mama didn't sleep a wink. And finally, she went to one of the old women who lived down the street to ask if she had any remedy for me. And the old woman made lye soap. But instead of making it out of fat, she made it out of butter. So she went home and got a bar of her lye soap she made with butter, and came back and grated up a pan of it, mixed a little water with it, and put it all over my face and my chest and my arms, and wrapped cloth around them. And didn't take it off for about 3 days. And when she finally came and helped Mama soak my arms and chest and wash all that off, it was just clean of any scabs or anything. It was, you know, red, and she put something else on it to keep it from getting infected. And I got well. My face looked so horrible and swollen. Mama kept all the mirrors covered so I couldn't see myself. But one day I snuck up to the mirror and pulled the towel up and looked. And it was horrible. I have these scars here because I couldn't open my mouth to eat, and I'd pull the scabs also I could eat. Had a straw I had to get stuff through. And I have a big scar here. But that's all I have. And she thought she had ruined me. It hurt her worse than it did me. Of course, she lost the twins. I remember Daddy building the little coffin in the shop and wrapping them up. I could see him wrapping them up in something and put them in there to bury them. They had a cemetery nearby. And the next day I missed one of Mama's quilts. one of Mama's kind of new quilts was missing, so I knew that's what it was, that he wrapped those babies in that quilt. To put them in that wooden coffin he made.
Uh-huh. Were the twins ever named?
If they did, I didn't know. They might have talked about names before they were born.
Uh-huh.
But it was such a terrible time at that time, they probably didn't think about names.
Mm-hmm.
You know, neighbors come in to help, and there was a midwife lived nearby,
Mm-hmm.
and she came to help as Mama miscarried. They were stillborn. Boys. They were boys.
Twin boys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll have two uncles in heaven I've never met.
There was a period of time, too, when Willie was sick. And I don't know what was wrong with him. There was a lot of malaria then. And Daddy dosed us all the time with quinine, powdered quinine. It wasn't capsules either. It was all the same. You have no idea what bitter is, so you get quinine in your mouth. And they hated to give it to us. We just hated it, you know.
Yeah.
Daddy would even let us have coffee with cream and sugar in it. And that was an absolute no-no for us.
Uh-huh.
But he let us drink that afterwards, try to get the bitter taste out of our mouth. And we'd go out on the porch and lay down on our stomachs and spit and spit off the porch trying to get rid of the bitter taste. Well, it was such a desperate time, and Daddy, a man who'd always made a living to his family, couldn't get work. I can remember him going off every day in the wagon. And the last thing he'd say to me and Willie, we'd be out watching him leave, and he'd say, "Don't you kids be playing on that cellar." He was afraid it would cave in with us.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute he was out of sight, we'd run up that door and on top of that cellar and start sliding down. Mama kept her canned fruit in it, and then she'd can, you know, what she had to can. It was such a desperate time. Daddy's Mama's uncle, her mother and brother spent a lot of time with us, and him and Daddy would hew out cross ties to sell to the railroad. They got 50 cents a piece for them. They had to cut down a tree. They were about 8 inches square, and they had to be perfect. I remember seeing them load up 6 of those in the wagon and drive it off, and came back with 2 that had been rejected. They weren't perfect enough. And Daddy sawed them up for stove wood for the kitchen stove. The Depression that started in '29. And it was a desperate time for everybody. And Daddy got so he couldn't make a decision. And Mama decided we had to leave Oklahoma or we'd all starve. So she called someone, I think maybe her brother or maybe an uncle. Somebody came in a car and took Mama and us kids back to Texas to Grandpa Elmer's place.
Mm-hmm.
In 3 days, Daddy showed up. And it was a farm, big farm owned by a man named Womack. He leased out land to people to farm.
Mm-hmm.
And in a week's time, Daddy was head man on the farm. Like you say, his versatility, you know, and doing everything. He could do carpenter and fix trucks and tractors and work the blacksmith shop.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, he rented land from Mr. Womack, the bottom land down below, near the river. It was rich land. You know, the river flooded every year, deposited silk there on the...
Right.
And so he became a sharecropper. And they called it farming on the 3rd and 4th. You had to give the farmer, had to give the owner of the land 1/3 of the corn and 1/4 of the cotton. The corn was to feed the stock and the family,
Mm-hmm.
and the cotton was for money to make it for 1 more year. It was a money crop. And it was the richest land in the county, the bottom land, they call river bottom land. And the Johnson grass was head high. And me and Willie and Daddy were the only workers of our crops. And Daddy didn't believe in cutting off grass at the top of the ground, so he'd come back up. We had to dig up the roots of the Johnson grass and put them in sacks. Me and Willie dragged many a tow sack of Johnson grass roots out of the field and burned them. But he'd clean up a patch of land, and the next year it wouldn't be so bad to work it.
Mm-hmm.
That was where he got in the habit of telling me and Willie to tell her to go. And we'd get to talking. We just talked all the time. We enjoyed each other.
Uh-huh.
And we'd be talking. We'd get slower and slower. And he'd turn back and say, "Tell her to go. You can't tell her to go. Don't tell it."